Siddhanta, which is, has been for, I don't know, maybe 1800 years-ish, 1600 years.
Yeah, at least.
I mean, yeah, I guess I don't want to even get into the idea of dating things because it's very, people have a lot of strong opinions. If something says that it was written in 10 million years ago because Brahma said this and that, then, that's one perspective. Then the same text might say the solstice was in this star, which was 2,000 years ago. But, so I don't want to even talk about it. It's time, Our perceptions of time.
Using that, so that's at least 2,000 years.
Varahamihira was in the 1400s.
1400s.
Yeah. So this was old in Varahamihira's time.
1400 AD?
Yeah.
Yeah. Varahamihira. I think maybe 1200. I think. But like our perception of time, our perception of history is based on an idea that we've learned. There's a lot of other ways of viewing the past and future. And so, if you try to project like our kind of linear way of measuring things onto a completely different thing, there's a lot of things that don't necessarily work. So I won't talk about when this was written, but it's for a long time been like the major text for like Gola Ganita, astronomy, for knowing the calculations of where the planets are, some things on cosmology and stuff.
And the rishi who wrote that is
I think it was narrated by
of Ravana.
Yeah, something like that. It was yeah, there's some demon. I think it's the sun. The sun is teaching a demon or something like that.
He's also the
These calculations, they're all still used today? These calculations?
Well, the thing with the Sri Siddhanta is there's some things that are very difficult to calculate really accurately. I mean, it is quite accurate, but modern calculations are different. Sometimes, like some things like tithis, because the moon's position is really hard to calculate, because the Earth's gravitational pull will pull the moon a little bit, and the sun will pull it, and so there's a lot of eccentricities in the moon's orbit, and that was really hard to calculate in ancient times. So the lunar position is sometimes tricky in the Surya Siddhanta, and there's a school of Panchanga makers that, like the old school, use this, but the new school use like astronomical calculations, and sometimes there's quite a big difference.
They talk about 2 other planets in that too.
Wow. Yeah, possible. I've definitely not studied the Surya Siddhanta that in depth. I've flipped through a lot of it. It's a lot of really intense mathematics, but it's beautiful. You guys know in Jyotish there's the 3 skandhas for the 3 eyes. And most of what we've been studying is Hora Shastra, which is the left eye vidya. The interpretation of charts, and if you have a chart in front of you and you're looking at it and you're interpreting things, that's Hora Shastra. That's the lunar side. The right eye side is the Ganita. That's actually knowing where the planets are and being able to make a chart. And in ancient times, you couldn't just pull up somebody's chart on a computer. You had to know about the movements of the planets. But now Jyotish is primarily the left eye. But it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot in here that, I mean, I don't want to say is out of date, but applied more to people that didn't have telescopes and didn't have computers and couldn't calculate really accurate planetary positions. I personally think using where the moon really is in the sky rather than like some calculated mean position of the moon is probably going to give more accurate results. But
Ganita
I
is
don't
not
know.
really used anymore.
So what?
Technology.
Well, the Ganita is in Jagannath Hora.
Yeah, it's Ganita's gone to a new level. Like maybe the Hora Shastra level in this time and age is at a lower level than it has been in history, but the Ganita, because astronomy is supported by Western science, has risen to incredible levels. So in that way, these computers and NASA is doing a slightly better job than that in calculating. But there's all kinds of other things in there.
Yeah, and still people don't know where the Ayanamsha is.
Yeah.
There's still discrepancy. So, we've come really far in some ways, but exactly like where the zodiac starts, like people don't really agree on that. So the most fundamental things, you can't look in a telescope and see, oh, there's the beginning of Aries. Like there's no point that shows beginning of Aries unless you're using Chitrapaksha or this Revati or... Anyway, we use Chitrapaksha. So in the Surya Siddhanta, the chapter 14 talks about the different modes of reckoning time. And it says the different modes are called mana, like kinds of measurement. There's 9 modes of measuring time. That of Brahma, of the Devas, of the Pitris, of Prajapati, of Brihaspati. Then there's of the sun, of the Savana, which I'll explain, the Somya, the lunar, and then the nakshatra. Of all these, 4 are predominantly used by humans. The upper 4 of Brahma, of the gods, of the Pitris and Prajapati, they might be a little bit explained in some of the Shastras, but for our practical purposes, we're using the sun and moon. We can't see what's happening in these Deva realms, whatever that means, depending on your mind. And then the one in the middle of the Brihaspati, that's also used, but not that much. So when you look at Indian calendars and any kind of festival, or anything related to seasons, you have 9 different ways of calculating time. And so it's all going to be, it can be kind of confusing. Predominantly, you have the sun and moon and earth. All of these are predominantly the relationship of the sun, the moon, the earth, and the stars. You guys are all familiar with tropical and sidereal zodiacs, yeah? How to say it? The tropical zodiac really will define your seasons. What star is at the solstice and equinox will change through different eras. But the fact that winter starts on the winter solstice, unless the poles switch or, something happens like that, like generally you have the ayanas, the 2 ways of the sun moving through the year. And this is found like in the Rig Veda, where they talk about the ayanas. So, at the winter solstice, the sun starts moving to the south. It's called the Dakshinayana. And it keeps moving further and further south, and then there's more and more heat and everything, and then you hit the summer solstice, which is like the maximum. And then it turns around and starts moving north. And so that's the basic tropical flow of the year. You have the equinoxes in between. And however, how often do you ever see the tropical zodiac mentioned in Jyotish texts? Like we're sidereal and everything. So it's there, but it's not emphasized so much. In the Vishnu Purana, they really describe the tropical zodiac. I could read you guys the parts of it. They talk, when the sun enters the beginning of Capricorn, then it's the solstice and it starts moving the other direction and enters Cancer. It's describing the zodiac totally tropically. And you could say, oh, maybe the Vishnu Purana was written around 300 AD when both zodiacs were together, but it's been used for a long time, and it says when it enters the beginning of the sign. And this, Sanjay says that the tropical zodiac is the Vishnu chakra, whereas the sidereal zodiac is the Narayana chakra, according to Vishnu Purana. I've yet to find that shloka in here, but there's definitely a lot of references to the tropical zodiac. And so you can make 12 months like the tropical months of the year. And currently in India, in 1957 or something, there was like an all India calendar reform, and they made this new system of Indian months, which are basically tropical months, which I guess we can talk about later, but it's anyway.
Tropical months.
So now, like Aries begins at the spring equinox in the tropical zodiac. Now the month of Chaitra, according to the modern Indian calendar, begins at the spring equinox. But the month of... Alright, I'll go back a second. The months in Vedic times, if you look at the earliest descriptions of months, they were names of nakshatras. There's two different sets of the 12-month names. One of them is the name of the nakshatra where the full moon will be falling in that month. So, you have like Chaitra and Vaishakha and all these months which are related to, and I could read them to you if you want to write it down. Like, if you ever see, pretty much the entire Hindu calendar is based on, like, for religious festivals, is primarily based on these month names. Like, that's what's typically
The
used.
nakshatra division of
The nakshatra.
The months according to them, based on those names.
Yeah, and so I had an order that I was going to say all this stuff, but there's so many overlapping and confusing things. The idea of, like, it has changed so much in time, and like in the Vedas itself, there's a text called Vedanga Jyotisha. And there's a Rig Veda Vedanga Jyotisha, Yajurveda Vedanga Jyotisha, and then there's an Atharva Jyotisha, which is kind of different. And that was, in the Vedas, that was what was used, like the main book on how to calculate time, how to calculate the calendar. And that's really ancient, like way before Surya Siddhanta and way before all this other stuff. But it's pretty simple. I mean, they don't really even mention Rashis. It's all about nakshatras. And the 12 months are, instead of the Rashi names, they're given the nakshatra names. Because, the Indian calendar is primarily lunisolar in most parts of India. Because we have a mother and father, we have a sun and the moon. So we measure time, primarily the year and everything is measured from the sun. But the months are also commenced with the moon. So it's this dance, because, a lunar year, if you take 12 lunar months, it's like 354 days. And then one solar rotation is 365.24 or whatever. So, how to match these things up has been the subject of every culture's... It's like a way of diagnosing, or a way of really seeing how a people relates with time. How a people will relate with their environment, with the heavens. You can see how they make their calendars. And thus also in different parts of India, you have totally different calendars. So, like Sri Achyutananda was saying, you have the sun calendar, the civil calendar, the lunar, and sidereal. Those are the four main kinds. Those that are used by humans. So the sun calendar, it says, is both used to measure the day and night, the solstices, and also the Sankrantis. So when they're talking about the solar cycle, they're talking about both the tropical and sidereal zodiac. And that's where I've found it gets really confusing. Because they'll use the same month names for tropical and sidereal months. And however, in like you look in Mahabharata, they'll be talking about, and the equinox was in Mrigashira, I don't remember. There's like, in each of the different texts, they're talking about different eras of time where different stars were rising at the solstices and equinoxes. But to make sense out of which thing they were using can be confusing. Yeah, and like from a seasonal perspective, you have to use tropical zodiac. Like in Sushruta Samhita, when he mentions, I don't think Charaka and Bhagavad actually use the names of the seasons, but they could. I could be wrong. But Sushruta, when he uses there's an other name of the seasons, or of the months. I'm sorry. And I think, I haven't found this anywhere, but I think these refer more to months tropically.
What do you mean, like Hemanta, Grishma?
Well, those are there's 6 seasons. Are you guys all familiar with the 6 seasons? There's 12 months in the year, and you take each of the 12 months, 2 of the months together makes 1 season. And then there's also 3 seasons if you take 2 of those together. And then 5 seasons according to Kashyapa Rishi. Anyway, yeah.
Are they each ruled by a different graha?
Yeah.
And that's
So you
used,
got,
But
like-
generally seasons are Mercury.
and it's used in seasons is a general of Mercury, but each season is connected to a certain graha, which is used in Nashta Jataka to know what season a person was born. When we start fine tuning.
But yeah, so the whole year is based on the relationship of the sun and moon, the earth and the stars. So you have these tropical months, and I'll tell you the names of these months.
Eric, what page are you looking at in the series Siddhanta?
311.
Yeah, there's
310,
like we have a
311.
few translations. It's chapter 14 on the it's like the mana something adhyaya. Oh wait, no, okay. So yeah, the names that Sushruta uses are also the names like an ancient form of names. So we'll start from Vasant Ritu, which is the springtime. It gives Madhu and then Madhava, and then in summer and Grishma is Shuchi, then Shukra. Then Varsha is Nabha and Nabhasya. Sharad Autumn is Isha and Urja Kartika.
What is
Or
Madhu,
Urja.
Madhava, Suchi, and Shukra? They are
Those the months?
These are like, you know, there's 2 different names of months. There's the names according to the nakshatras, like Chaitra, Vaishakha, Jeshta, Ashada, Shravana. These are the general Indian names. Are you guys all familiar with that at all? So okay, step back. I'm sorry, this is winding all over the place.
right.
The way these months are calculated is you look and see where the new moon in each sign falls. So the new moon in Aries is going to be Vaishakha Masa, because that's where the full moon's going to be in Vishaka.
So the names
Oh, wait.
after
Did I get that wrong?
Ritu is just
Yeah.
Madhu and Madhava.
Yeah, that's what I have, and I could totally be. They could also, Madhu could mean the same thing as Chaitra. It does right now, but the fact that a few thousand years ago they were also using that word for the first month of the year, like in ancient Vedic times, makes me think that maybe these are the names of tropical months. This is just what I've gotten from trying to make sense out of all these crazy calendars and cycles of time. You know, I could be completely wrong. It could be just a synonym for Madhu could just mean Chaitra, and Madhava could just mean Vaishaka. But that's what I was thinking.
If it's seasonal, so it sounds tropical.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. And so then Isha and Urja were for Sharad. Hemant, winter, are Saga and Sahasya. Shirsha, late winter, is Tapa and Tapasya. And you know, in the Ayurvedic system, you know, they're also referring to this kind of thing when they're measuring, like, how the different seasons are affecting the body. Like, that has to be tropical. I mean, it's gonna always be, or it's a combination. I mean, it's what's applying right now, because now we have this Ayanamsha where it is, and so we have. Are you guys? Do you guys all know what Sankrantis are? And you all are familiar with like the sun and the Sidereal zodiac, yeah?
But I don't know what Sankranti is.
Okay, so I was just describing what Sanjay Ji is referring to as the Vishnu chakra. You know, the cycle of the earth and the sun. You know, making solstices and equinoxes. Then there's the Narayana chakra, and I'll read you a beautiful description of Narayan.
The Sankranti is when the sun changes signs.
Oh,
It's that day.
Oh yeah,
It's
on
the
the
day.
edge.
Yeah.
yeah. So you have the Sidereal zodiac, which is in a different vibration than the tropical zodiac. And when the sun changes rashis in the Sidereal zodiac, that day is called Sankranti. So this is from Vishnu Purana, the beginning of chapter 9. And if you guys have any insight on what this means, that would be wonderful. Because I mean, I read it and it's beautiful, but it's kind of strange. It says the form of the mighty Hari, which is present in heaven, consisting of the constellations, is that of a porpoise. So he says that Narayan, in the form of the nakshatras, is this cosmic Ganga dolphin, right? With Dhruva, the pole star, on the tail. And so as Dhruva revolves, it causes the sun, moon, and stars to turn round also. All the lunar asterisms follow on its circular path, for all celestial luminaries are in fact bound to the pole star by aerial cords. So, you know, so there's Jagannath, you know, on the top, and then he's this Ganga dolphin, and the tail is Dhruva, the pole star, and then from there there's all these like invisible light cords, and by that turning it makes all the planets move around the heavens. And then, for all the celestial luminaries are bound by the polar star by aerial cords. The porpoise-like figure of the celestial sphere is upheld by Narayana, who himself in planetary radiance is seated in its heart, while the son of Uttanapada, Dhruva, in consequence of his adoration of the Lord of the world, shines in the tail of the stellar porpoise. The upholder of the porpoise-shaped sphere is the sovereign of all, Janardana. The sphere is the supporter of Dhruva, and by Dhruva the sun is upstayed. Upon the sun depends this world with its gods, demon, and men. And then he talks about the sun. So the sun itself, which creates the seasons and creates the equinoxes and solstices, that sun itself is a manifestation also of Vishnu. And they also describe really beautiful in Vishnu Purana how the sun in itself is Vishnu, and all the different signs it shines through is like that sustaining of the universe, which is Narayan. So exactly where Narayan and Vishnu get separated as two different entities, I don't completely understand that.
In
from here.
Sanskrit, he's using Vishnu, that's what you think.
Well, if we're just calling the tropical zodiac the Vishnu chakra.
And in the other, in Jyotish, they would use...
In Jyotish, whenever we're making charts, we're always using the Narayan
Both.
chakra.
I'm just trying to see if it's...
We're using both.
By the two.
We're using totally both.
But generally,
What?
when you learn, when you are studying someone's chart, you're looking at the Sidereal zodiac.
Yeah.
You know,
For that.
Western astrology is looking at the tropical zodiac. Chinese astrology is looking at kind of the tropical zodiac in a different way, but that's, anyway. Yeah, so the Narayana chakra. So exactly how Narayan and Vishnu are different entities, like I personally don't understand that aspect of it as of yet. But so you have the 12 Sankrantis. And, you know, according the general beginning of the year is Mesha Sankranti. For, you know, of course, in Hindu year, there's like 5 different New Years, right?
Yeah.
So the New Year's for the people that follow the solar calendar, which is, I think, Orissa, Bengal, like Cambodia and Southeast Asia, some parts of Yunnan in China, and some parts of South India are using more the solar-based calendar. For them, Mesha Sankranti is kind of like the beginning of the year. But that's on the relationship of the sun and the stars, right? It also happens to be just after the equinox. So, in a few thousand years, the year will start maybe in, what's the month before Chaitra? In Falgun or something. I don't know. Who knows how the Panchanga makers will make it then. Or it might just be like the Muslim calendar where it doesn't really follow any logic with the seasons at all. But Hindu calendar generally is always evolving with the time because they have these yugas and whatnot. So then you have the Sankranti. So the sun actually enters the beginning of Aries. Then you see where the first new moon is. So that's what makes it a lunisolar calendar. Is you find the new moon when the sun is in Aries. And that's actually the beginning of the lunisolar month of Chaitra. Or Vaishaka.
So it's the first new moon after the Aries Sankranti.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's Vaishaka. That's the beginning of Vaishak Masa.
Because it's full moon then.
The new moon. Well, there's also two different ways of calculating the lunar month. You have the Amanta and the Purnimanta. In different regions of India, some places they start the month with the new moon. Other places they start the month with the full moon. But even the places that start with the full moon, which is including most of northern India, and generally what Sanjay's teaching on this is that when you start the month on the new moon, that's more like for social and financial, worldly kind of concerns. Starting on the full moon is more for the religious, spiritual kind of concerns. He also happens to be living in the place where they're starting on the full moon.
Why did they do it that way? Why would it be spiritual full moon?
Well, just the energy of the full moon is, it's very otherworldly. The new moon is really physical, and the new moon, like your prana is in your feet, and then it through the tithis it moves through the body, and on the full moon it's on the crown of your head. So it's very much like on the full moon day you want to like go run in the woods or do sadhana. You don't want to like you leave your job. But I don't know. That's just what it is. Do you know any other explanation of that?
I mean, if you look at plants,
Mm-hmm.
herbs, and I'm just used because she asked the question, so I'll use an Ayurvedic explanation. But herbs where you're using the flowers or the leaves, you pick when the moon is very full, because the full moon is pulling all the energy into the upper part of the plants. Where things like roots, you pick on the new moon because at that part of time, all the energy is going to the roots of the plants. So the new moon is bringing the energy down into the lower chakras in us, as well as bringing it up into the upper chakras during the full moon.
However,
So
I'm gonna say something that'll make you never pick a root on the new moon ever again.
at the time, not on the new moon.
Chapter 12.
But when the moon is towards love, it's basically the juice, the rasa of the plant is getting pulled up and then being pulled down. And as you notice as well in Kriya Yoga, that inhaling up is bringing the energy up, and that relates to the waxing moon. Where bringing it down is relating to the waning moon.
Yeah,
So the energy is going up and down, and it's happening naturally in plants.
So Vishnu Purana explains really beautiful what he just said. Then he talks in chapter 12 about the moon. He talks about the chariots of the moon with horses with the whiteness of jasmine, 5 on the left and 5 on the right, moving through the stars. And of course held by a cord from the pole star. So the moon's being dragged around by these horses. And then the sun is feeding through this Shushumna Kala, feeding the moon its brightness. So the moon's waxing and waning as the sun's brightness is like nourishing and pulling the moisture and the essence from the moon. Says, when reduced to the draughts of the gods in a single kala with a single ray, and in the same proportion as the ruler of the night was exhausted by the celestials, it is replenished by the sun, the plunderer of the waters. Because the idea about the seasons, you can look at any of these cycles of time, like you have a year, a month, and a day, and they all have this waxing and waning side to them. like the moon is getting full and growing in abundance, and then it's waning and then going back towards new. The day, you have the day growing and then going to night, and you have the seasons going and spiraling. So they're all parallel. And even in life, you're born and you age and you die. That's just the natural way of things in this world.
And the water element, more water, relates to moksha marga. What are the moksha trines?
4, 8,
Which are what element?
Water.
Okay. So that lack of water also shows lack of spirituality, which shows a more dense reality, which is business. Make sense?
Yeah, but as you age, you get more spiritual, but you also get more dry.
Well, that's physical level.
Yeah.
So
Generally,
maybe
you're
people
born.
draw-
What's making you age? Which house?
Vyasa.
Which house though?
6 house? 12 house?
8th house. It's making you age. So it's the water might be leaving your body, but you're going into that water trine.
So you have all these different cycles, and they describe in the time of the year that's getting really hot, from winter to summer solstice. They say that the sun is sucking all of the moisture from the earth, and that's just making it dry, and it's making it hot, and that's also why these different diseases are coming at this times and everything. And it's also sucking it from the moon. It's the same as like in the waning month. And then, it's called the there's a Ayurvedic. It's like the Visarga and Adhanakala. In Ayurveda, they talk a lot about that, like, because in the time when the sun's drawing all the moisture, you need to be taking more moistening foods, and during doing certain kinds of cleansing practices that will maybe like be more eliminating the dryness instead of eliminating the mucus, or I don't know.
That's why they don't do therapies out of season, because nature doesn't support rejuvenation, because it's about sapping.
Right.
At the same time, though, you can break down the pakshas. So you have your season that you're supposed to be doing something, but then you have waning and waxing moon. So whether you're, how you're working with it, adding or subtracting, is also going to be supported or unsupported by the phases.
And so the sun, as it draws the moisture, there's a really beautiful thing it says here, that the water that the sun has drawn up from the Ganga of the sky, he quickly pours down with his rays, and without a cloud. So if there's this like celestial moisture that comes from the sky when there's no clouds in the sky, men who are touched by this pure rain are cleansed from the soil of sin and never see hell. This is termed the celestial ablution. The rain which falls while the sun is shining and without a cloud in the sky is the water of the heavenly Ganga shed by the solar rays. Isn't that beautiful? If, however, rain falls from the bright and cloudless skies when the sun is in Kritika Nakshatra or any of the other odd number nakshatras, then the water, although it is of the Ganga of the sky, is scattered by the elephants of the quarters, not by the rays of the sun. It is only when such rain falls and the sun is in the even nakshatras, then it is distributed by its beams. Isn't that cool? And the water, and then there's the moisture that's coming from the clouds, nourished by the moon. The water which the clouds shed upon earth is in truth the ambrosia of living beings, for it gives fertility to the plants which are the support of their existence. When all these vegetables grow and are matured and become the means of by this they're all growing and mature and become the means of maintaining life. With them again, these men who take the law for the light perform daily sacrifices, and through them give nourishment to the gods. And by these sacrifices, all of the universe and the world are supported by the rains by which this food is produced.
Sacrifices, they mean yajna.
Yeah. So by doing yoga, you're feeding the sun, and you're feeding this like celestial energy. And so by doing that, the rain is supported, food is produced. By the rain is evolved the sun. By the sun is sustained by Dhruva. and Dhruva supported by the celestial porpoise-shaped sphere, which is one with Narayan. Narayan, the primeval, existent, and eternally enduring, seated in the heart of the stellar sphere as the supporter of all beings. So that's Vishnu as the cosmic sustainer of the universe, by holding up the sun and moon, and they're doing this dance of the waters. So with that in mind, going back to Amavasya and planets, when they're describing the moon, so the moon is waxing and waning according to the sun feeding and taking this moisture away. And I think when the moon is waxing, it's feeding the devas, and then it's waning and it feeds the pitris. And there's these different things about how the different classes of beings sustain their nourishment. It says the gods drink the nectar and ambrosia during half of the month. From this being their food, they are immortal. So since the devas are drinking this waning lunar energy up to full moon, they're immortal. They never die. They're continually waxing. 3,600, 333 divinities drink the lunar ambrosia. When it's waning and only 2 digits remain, the moon enters the orb of the sun and abides in the rain called Ama, which means together. Whereas this period is termed Amavasya. And that orbit, the moon is immersed for a day and night in the water. Thence it enters the branches and the shoots of the trees, and thence goes off to the sun. Consequently, anyone who cuts off a branch or casts down a leaf when the moon is in the trees on the day of its rising invisible is guilty of killing a Brahmin. So if you harvest your roots,
not on the actual day.
Not near Amavasya.
Branches of the tree.
Anything of the tree.
Yeah, because it's at that time that the celestial water is being shot invisibly to nourish the sun or something. Their whole concept of these waters, and even how conception happens and how souls are sucked up to the moon and then go down and then you eat them, and they have this really fascinating cosmology relating to water and rain. Rain is really fascinating, this idea of the celestial rain. In Chinese, there's one of the main words for soul is called ling, and ling is the character of it has got rain on the top, so it's this soul that's nourished by the celestial rain. It's really beautiful. But anyway, so
isn't that how we enter the sperm? We come down in the rain.
Yeah, you come down in the rain, then the father eats you, and then your soul is in the rice. And so then it goes into his semen, and then you're created from that. And who knows what that, if you want to translate that to our scientific understanding, who knows what that means? It could have this, people would look at it and be these guys are backwards and superstitious, but maybe in a few years they'll discover some other level to it, or not. Who knows?
So you're not meant to harvest anything on the waning moon?
On
the
Amavasya.
day of the new moon. On the waning moon, that's your roots and things like that I mentioned. Yeah. It's just not on that actual day.
So it says
you don't harvest anything.
When the remaining portion of the moon consists of but a 15th part, the pitris approach it in the afternoon and drink the last portion, that sacred kala which is composed of ambrosia, and contained
their new moon.
And contained in the 2 digits in the form of the moon. Having drunk the nectar effused by the lunar rains on this day of conjunction, the progenitors are satisfied and remain tranquil for the ensuing month. The pitris of our 3 classes, the Somyas, Varishaudas, and Agni Svatas. Do any of you guys know about the different kinds of pitris?
What's a pitri?
Pitris are the ancestors. They talk about all these different kinds, and then they said some of the other Puranas has 4 different kinds ruling the different seasons. Definitely a fascinating subject for research that I haven't seen anyone ever mention.
Now, ancestors
I don't know about those words.
People that we came from.
Well, I don't know about those particular words, but the primary archetypal pitris are the 7 rishi.
Right.
Because we all evolved from the 7 Rishi at some level.
True, but however, in the
And-
Puranic cosmology,
yeah, but
the
that's
Rishis and
first
the
level.
Pitris live in different places.
Yeah, but that's first level. Is they're the first Pitris.
Yeah.
They're like the Adi Pitris, like Shiva's Adi
Yeah,
Guru.
the Gotras.
And then from there, then you have the actual Pitris of the races.
Mm.
Like whether you're, Indian, Caucasian,
Right.
African, then you have those level of Pitris. And then you have like your actual family Pitris. So you have different levels of Pitris at that level. I don't know if that's what those words mean, but...
It's possible. The footnote was really strange. I mean,
Is this the Surya Siddhanta?
no, this
It's
is Vishnu
Vishnu
Purana. The Vayu and Matsya Purana add a fourth class, the Kavyas, the poets, and identify them with the cyclical years, the Somyas and Agni Shtavas with the seasons, and the Varishads with the months. So that's those Puranas' explanation of these Pitris. Like I said, it's fascinating, but this whole cosmology stuff, like, there's not really too much aside from the actual text. Like, there's not that much research written on it. In this manner, the moon with its cooling rays nourishes the gods in the Shukla Paksha, the Pitris in the Krishna Paksha, and vegetables with the cool nectary aqueous atoms it sheds upon them, and through their development it sustains men, animals, and insects, and gratifying them by its radiance. So that was Vishnu Purana.
So let me get this straight. Harvesting, okay, on the Shukla Paksha.
Harvesting, okay, anytime.
And
they just say not Amavasya.
That's the only day.
Yeah.
What we were talking about was what to harvest. Because the upper leaves and flowers are generally have more rasa during the waxing moon. But even on the actual full moon, it's not really auspicious to harvest. Like a lot of people go and harvest or plant seeds and stuff like that on the full moon itself. It's actually the 5 days before the new moon is actually where it's more auspicious to plant. Before, because the new moon, the full moon itself is you're supposed to be meditating and doing spiritual things. You're not supposed to be out harvesting or starting your seeds or things like that. It's a different. It's an energy of completeness. Things aren't growing anymore. Where that just before the full moon, there's still that it's growing into its fullness. And then going down, the energy's going deeper into the plants, into the bark, into the roots. So you harvest them, they have more ojas, more prana at that period of time. But from what he says, the new moon, in general, the new moon itself, those 2 points aren't good. But this is saying it's more than not good. It's like
killing the sun.
Yeah.
It also says that there's this. There's some. This is a really cool book. It talks about why you have to do the Gayatri in the morning.
Is it okay if I show the calendar that I have to see if it's the Vaishnava?
Yeah, show it and write.
It's got a lot of women's pictures and...
Yeah. We'll break in a few, I think.
Yeah, I don't know how detailed you guys want to get about the calendar, but then they talk about the day and night.
Why should we do the Gayatri?
Okay, so the night is called Usha, and the day is denominated Vyushta. The interval between them is called Sandhya. You guys know the word Sandhya, like that in between junction time. I don't need to know the calculation of how to measure the Sandhya, but can talk about it later. On the occurrence of the awful Sandhya, the terrific fiends termed Mandehas attempt to devour the sun, for Brahma denounced this curse upon them, that without the power to perish, they should die every day and revive by night, and therefore a fierce contest occurs daily between them and the sun.
Who's that?
These Mandehas, which are these like demons that are immortal, but Brahma cursed to like be fighting the sun, and so when it's darkness, the sun is somewhere else in the universe. It's like the other side of the world, but there's these demons, and then the sun has to rise and has to defeat these demons in order to rise. So they say, at this season, pious brahmanas scatter water purified by the mystical Omkar and consecrated by the Gayatri, By this water, as by a thunderbolt, the foul fiends are consumed. When this first oblation is offered, and with solemn invocations in the morning rite, the thousand-rayed deity shines forth with unclouded splendor. Omkar is Vishnu the mighty, the substance of the three Vedas, the lord of speech, and by its enunciation the Rakshasas are destroyed. The sun is the principal part of Vishnu, and his light is the immutable essence, the active manifestation of which is excited by the mystical syllable Om. So this mystic Om, the light effused by the utterance of Om becomes radiant, and it burns up entirely the Rakshasas and the Mandehas. The performance of the Sandhya morning sacrifice must never therefore be delayed, for he who neglects this is guilty of the murder of the sun. Because the sun won't rise if people don't do their Gayatri. Like if one day, like, you know, everyone forgets to do Gayatri, maybe the sun won't rise and then the demons will come take over. Protected thus by the Brahmins and the pygmy sages called the Balakilyas. Do you know about the pygmy sages that are hanging out with the sun?
This is new. Aside from all.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about them. There's these little pygmy sages that hang out with the sun, and they protect the sun, and then the sun goes and gives light to the whole world. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to the months.
Months, yeah.
And what exactly the months are and how, you know, it's...
Okay, so you have 12 rashis. The sun is going to enter the 12 rashis. Yeah? Sankranti. 12 Sankranti. In that, you have a new moon. Generally. You guys know that the signs are of different lengths? Yeah? No? Okay. Do you guys know anything about, like, Kepler? Okay, elliptical motion, astronomy, yeah. The sun, when bodies orbit around the sun, they move in an elliptical pattern. By that, there's certain mathematical principles where, because it's an elliptical shape, it'll move the same amount of arc in different amounts of time. Therefore, some rashis will be longer than others. For that reason, you know, you have, like, the lagna changes. It's not like the lagna is always 2 hours changing. It's the different signs are different, and it's going to depend also on other factors like latitude and stuff. So, because of that, the lengths of time from Sankranti to Sankranti are going to differ. So that there's also a variance because, like I said before, the moon's orbit is erratic, just as the mind's movement is erratic. So some lunation cycles will be longer than others. Like I have the actual figures here. There's a lot of mathematics in this, and I thought you guys probably wouldn't be that interested. So I didn't write that much down.
But these are, you know, he's going into some details, but when we start talking about holidays, these are factors where when you understand this, and people start saying, no, it's this month, no, it's that month, you can understand why is it this month. And some people, they start making things up. If you don't understand this foundation, and you start making things up, then you look silly. Especially when you publish a book, and you say your things not knowing the foundation. People do, you know. So when you understand these foundations, how months are calculated, why they're calculated, the different variations, then when you say something, or when you think about a holiday and you know it's on the new moon of Magha Purnima, then you know what that means.
Yeah, my intention in this was, I mean, you can get a list of the holidays, but I wanted you to understand how the months work. Because the list of the holidays is just like, oh, this is Shukla Chaturdashi of Margashirsha. But, you know, you have to understand what that means, and then you can understand where all of the holidays are. So generally, the time between two lunar cycles is 29 days, 7 to 19 hours. And a solar month is 29 days, 7 hours to 31 days, 15 hours. So there's a few days of difference. And that is what, because different cultures, they make their lunar month correspond to the solar year in different ways. The way the Hindu calendar does it is by intercalary months. Because, you have to add a 13th month every once in a while in order to match it up. Like there's a 5-year yuga cycle from the Vedanga Jyotisha. It's like a cycle of 5 years, and in that there's 60 solar months and 62 lunar months. So those 2 extra lunar months, or it's actually 3 extra, but then there's 1 omitted. Because if you look at one Rashi, if you have a new moon falling in that Rashi, then that's going to be the month, according to the name of the opposite nakshatra, because it's full moon. However, some months, because the sign will be longer, you'll have 2 new moons in that month, in that Rashi. So if you have 2 new moons in one Rashi, then you will have an Adhika Masa. You'll have an extra month. And that's where there's a lot of regional variation, and depending on different ceremonies, sometimes you use the first month, sometimes you use the second month. And it's the same with tithis too, which we can talk about later. And then other times, on very rare occasions, like, sometimes there's a gap of 140 years between these cycles. There's an omitted month, where it's a shorter sign and a longer lunar cycle, and somehow there's no new moon in that Rashi. So that's a Kshaya Masa. That's pretty rare, but it happens. And that means there'll be 2 Adhika Masas in the month before and the month after. So there's a lot of complexities, and to know like which activities are auspicious on the first month and the second month, that's really changes. I mean, like some things it's like, if you're a widow or a sannyas, then you use the second, and if you're a normal person, you use the first, and there's a lot of different rules. It's just like, you guys know all how to calculate tithi? You guys all know what tithis are. Well, alright. Tithis are lunar days. So we talked a bit about month, and I guess I'll finish the month thing. So we're looking at the new moons in each of the Rashis of the sun. That's for the new moon calculated month. For the full moon calculated month, you still look at that same new moon. So let's say you had a new moon like at 2 degrees Aries. The previous full moon to that would be the actual beginning of that month. So even if it's not about where the full moon falls, it's where the next new moon falls. That's the Purnimasya month.
So it's always new moon then. That's the new moon sign.
It's the new moon sign, yeah, but you start with the full moon before it, and then the name is for the full moon. It's a confusing thing.
Basically,
it's basically new moon. Although the lunar cycle, like you call the beginning of Chaitra Masa or whatever Masa according to the full moon. If you're following the Purnimanta calendar. So that's some of the varied ways that months can be calculated. There's also another thing. There's the Savana calendar. I said there's 4 things for humans. Savana is generally translated civil. But what it is like, it doesn't matter where the sun is, doesn't matter where the moon is. The sun rise, like what Rashi or Nakshatra or Tithi or anything, the sun rises in the morning, sets at night, rises again the next morning. That period of sunrise to sunrise is a Savana day. So it's like a day for people. That's a day according to general life on Earth.
Government.
Yeah, for government, and originally it was actually for the Vedic sacrifices. And within the Savana Masa, or Savana day, there's like certain divisions and stuff, and the word Savana literally relates to something with these 3 different sacrifices in 3 times of the day.
So different spheres of activity would have different calendars.
Exactly.
To make best use of.
Exactly. Yeah, just in the same way we have so many different biological chronorhythms and stuff,
The government might have its own.
Yeah.
And basically, the Savana calendar is basically what we run on now. Doesn't matter where the sun and moon are.
So we use the Gregorian calendar.
We use
that's a Savana calendar.
And there's something with, the sun, the government, the king, George Bush. He, these people, they set the calendar for this land. So this Gregorian calendar followed by the world, people have numerological systems that work based on the Gregorian calendar. And even like people use the daily civil time. This idea of like daylight savings time and time zones is a completely illusory political phenomenon. Yet people do divination that works using it. So there is something of like a country setting the parameters. So now in India,
our calendar sets our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1957, I was saying before, the Indian calendar reform, they made these tropical names of months. And that's a totally Savana system. Where you start I think Chaitra right at the day after spring equinox. And then it's, instead of going 31 days and 30 days, like alternating, they'll have like 5 31 days in a row and then 7 30-day months. Kind of more matching the length of the Rashis. But it still ends up kind of working out. So that's, now all about months.
What does Savana mean, by the way?
Savana means, they generally translate it as civil, but the dictionary I looked at a couple of dictionaries, I looked up Savana, and they said it's related to the period of Vedic sacrifice. So it's, you wake up in the morning and then they have these certain pujas that are done. I guess maybe in older times when the Brahmanas were higher than Kshatriyas, like the civil day was related to Brahmins. Now it's more of the government.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends what sacrifices were for.
Yeah. And then, do you guys want me to go into Tithi calculations? And you want to? Okay. So then there's another form of day, which you can call a lunar day, and that's a Tithi. Basically, a Tithi means a 12-degree span of distance between the sun and moon. So, it's like you can have 12 times 30. You have 12 signs or 12 months with 30 degrees or 30 days. You could switch that around, or you can have 30 12-degree divisions. So it's like that. It's playing with this kind of, transitive property, some mathematical property, I forget what it's called, reflexive or something. So from that you have these 30 lunar days. And basically you just subtract the moon and sun's longitude, and whatever balance is the Tithi. And it's 15 from, new moon to full moon, and the one paksha, and 15 again from full moon to new moon. In the same way, a day is divided into 30 muhurtas. There's 15 muhurtas from sunrise to sunset, where you subdivide equally sunrise and sunset 15, and sunset to sunrise 15 muhurtas. And of course that will change with seasons, but it's the same general principle. So you have a Tithi, which is, it could be a number 1 to 15 in a certain paksha. And it's generally the moment of sunrise determines the Tithi for the day. However, I've seen that there are some exceptions. The day is divided into 5 subdivisions of 3 muhurtas each. And
this
some
is
pujas,
really important.
Some pujas are done, like I think Ganesh Chaturthi puja is supposed to be done on the 3rd subdivision. And it's so the day is divided into different times, and different pujas have different things. So if you have a puja that's supposed to happen at a certain point in midday, you actually take the Tithi from that starting of that muhurta in the day. You don't use the sunrise.
So Ganesh Chaturthi is not sunrise. The Tithi is sunrise. It's the Tithi at the 3rd section of the day.
There could be other views.
Mm-hmm.
That was what I found in my research. And also, some Pitri pujas are later in the afternoon, just before sunset. Other things like Ratri pujas, like Shiva Ratri and, Navaratri, all these things where you calculate in the nighttime, you actually calculate it from the Tithi balance at sunset. Then there's some other things, some special vratas where you calculate from moonrise. Which, I mean, there's just like, Hinduism is so vast in its application.
The importance of this, if you notice just the last Shiva Ratri, some people celebrated it on Friday and some people celebrated it on Thursday. The Tithi at sunset was Shiva Ratri on Thursday. Yet the Tithi, if you were calculating at sunrise, would have been Friday. So Sri Maha's ashram celebrated
and Livermore
on Thursday.
And Livermore on Friday.
But one thing that was interesting in their Sankalpa, maybe they just made a mistake, I don't know, but when they were chanting the Sankalpa in the beginning, they said, Krishna Trayodashi Tithi.
Yes.
So, and then I was really confused. But anyway, so there's a lot of variations, but generally you use sunrise. And also, when you're looking at a Jataka chakra, Jataka Kundalini, like a birth chart, there's certain things that you use the sunrise Tithi, and certain other things you use the actual balance at the time. And I wish I have it somewhere, I can find it for y'all later. There's certain pujas that are done according to one and certain done according to the other.
Like, for example, Sankranti. Is it if the sun changed signs at 9 o'clock in the morning, it wasn't Sankranti at sunrise. So is the person born in Sankranti or are they not in Sankranti?
And with Sankranti, there's 4 schools of determining the Sankranti. There's the Bengal school, the Orissa school, the Telugu school, and the Malayalam school, right? And according to, but this is for every month, and also determining New Year's Day, determining when is the inauspicious day to not do anything.
Because you're supposed to take off Sankranti. You're supposed to just, that's your day off for the month. You're supposed to stay home and just enjoy yourself.
According to the Orissa school, which I guess we are following because we're in this Odia Sampradaya, Sankranti falling from any time between one sunrise and the next sunrise, that day is Sankranti. That day when the actual change happens is Sankranti. The Bengali school is a little different. In the Bengali school, if it's sunrise till midnight, it's the next day. However, if it's from midnight till the following sunrise, it's 2 days later. So if today is Sunday, if tonight at 2 in the morning was the actual point of Sankranti, then Sankranti day would be Tuesday. Because it's 2 days later. If it's between dawn today and midnight, then it would be Monday. So that's the Bengali school. Then the Telugu school is, what is it? Sunset to sunset? Something like that. And then the Malayalam school is if it's from dawn till the 5th, or 3rd, 5th of the day. Because in Vedic times, the day was divided into different segments by muhurtas. You have 15 muhurtas from sunrise to sunset, each of 3 muhurtas each division. So if it's in the 3rd division, or before, it follows on that day. If it's any time after that to the next sunrise, then it's the next day. So that's the Malayalam school, as far as I can remember. But the Orissa school, I think, makes a lot of sense. If it happens any time from sunrise to sunrise, which is one civil day, one Sayana Dina, then it's that day of Sankranti. And that makes it easy.
So they're all right and they're all precise and they're all different.
Yeah. And maybe different geomantic areas somehow have different relations to the... I don't know.
You can feel a Sankranti day. When this day is Sankranti, there's the math level and then there's what actually, should we live our life on some mathematical calculation because somebody said so? Or is there some real value to it? The day the sun is Sankranti, it's a day you have your list of things to do and just none of them get done. You would have been better off to just take the day off and relax because you would have got the same amount of things done.
But if you don't know which day to take off before time, because you didn't know how to calculate it,
Yeah.
then you'll have a lot of stuff to do and you won't be able to.
So this
That's
is
what grace here, like be able to follow it.
yeah. So this is we're trying to calculate the day that energy is going to come.
Yeah.
That way we cannot make any major plans on that day because there's going to be no fruition.
Yeah, so
But you'll feel it if the
Usually
calculation is
every
wrong.
month.
You'll see that
No.
you took a day off and then the
sometimes
next day.
14th,
Yeah,
16th, 17th.
14, 15,
Around that time,
In a
but which
birth
day
chart,
it
you
is will
see
change.
that the
And which weekday it
indications
is a big
in the chart
deal too.
that's connected to the Sankranti, they're not giving any results. Which you'll see in one of the examples we're doing when he's done. There's a chart. Guy has incredible Raj Yogas, but it's not giving any results. So you
Because
see
it's
the
Sankranti.
results because of Sankranti. Or I saw a chart once. The guy, he had the Upapada Lagna in the 10th house. He was incredibly brilliant Indian who came over. He left school early, graduated by the time he had his master's at 18 or something, and couldn't get a job. He came over, they brought him over, the job ended. He couldn't get a job, he couldn't get a wife, nothing was, his Upapada was destroyed, his marriage point, and his 10th house was destroyed. And you could see that was connected to the Sankranti. So you could talk about mathematical calculations, but bottom line is...
That's the third eye of Jyotish.
Yeah.
You got the calculation, you have the general interpretation, and then to put them together and really know what to do.
So for that
You need to know both
you need to know both. And then
and balance the two.
Mm.
And then the third eye is naturally.
So that's probably good. Do you guys have any other questions or any other aspects? Y'all can look at the sun and the moon and you could know the masa and the tithi and...
No, but we got the point.
Sure.
So we'll take a small break and you're going to give us more?
Do you want more?
Yeah.
Do you want to...
What's more?
Right
Right.
into the
Holidays, yeah. I mean, I could just say quickly, there's two basic...
No, we'll take a break now.
Well, I could say
Tell us after.
5 minutes.